The massive starship docked at the Galactic Military Academy's orbital station, its sleek hull reflecting the light of 3 distant suns. Among the new cadets, Kate Miller stood at the viewport, her brown hair tied back in a regulation knot, watching as the legendary academy grew larger in view. The space station was a marvel of engineering. A rotating wheel 5 miles wide, creating artificial gravity through centrifugal force. Kate checked her uniform one last time, making sure every button was perfectly aligned. She was one of only 5 humans selected for this year's class, and the first from the North American Alliance. The weight of representing humanity pressed down on her shoulders harder than the increased gravity she would soon face. As the transport shuttle carried the new cadets to the main station, Kate noticed how different she looked from her fellow students. There were tall, crystalline beings from the Proxima systems, massive reptilians with natural armor plates, and even gaseous entities contained in special environmental suits. They all seemed to be purposefully keeping their distance from her. "Attention, new cadets," a voice boomed through the shuttle speakers. "Prepare for atmospheric adjustment and gravity transition." Kate had trained for this moment, but nothing could have truly prepared her for the sensation. As they passed through the atmospheric shields, the air became thicker, heavier with different gas mixtures. The gravity slowly increased, and Kate felt her knees buckle slightly. She grabbed the support rail, trying to stay upright as her body adjusted to 1.3 times Earth's gravity. "Look," a deep voice rumbled. "The primitive can barely stand." Kate turned to see a massive reptilian cadet, his scales gleaming with a metallic sheen, looking down at her with obvious contempt. Several other aliens laughed, their various forms of amusement creating an odd chorus. "On my world," the reptilian continued, "our children play in 3 times this gravity. How did they even accept you here?" Kate straightened her spine, ignoring the strain in her muscles. "The same way they accepted you," she replied evenly. "I earned my place." The reptilian's laugh sounded like rocks in a grinder. "Earned? Your species only achieved FTL travel 50 years ago. You're here because the Alliance needed to show how inclusive they are." Before Kate could respond, the shuttle docked with a slight shudder. The main doors opened, revealing a vast training hall. Instructors of various species stood in perfect formation, their uniforms displaying rank markings Kate had memorized during her preparation. The lead instructor, a tall humanoid with metallic skin, stepped forward. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. I am Commander Bright. You are here because your respective governments believe you have potential. Whether that belief is justified remains to be seen." His gaze swept across the group, pausing briefly on Kate. "You will be tested beyond your limits. Many of you will fail. Some of you may not survive. This is not a warning. It is a fact. If you wish to leave, now is your only chance." Nobody moved. Kate felt the air getting heavier in her lungs, but she stood straighter. The commander nodded slightly. "Your first test begins now. You have 10 minutes to reach the dormitory level. 20 floors up. The gravity will increase by 0.1 every minute. Those who fail to arrive will be eliminated from the program." Kate's heart sank as the other cadets rushed toward the gravity lifts. The reptilian cadet shot her a mocking smile as he passed. "Try not to die, human. It would look bad on our record." Looking at the stairs, Kate took a deep breath of the thick air. She had known this wouldn't be easy. Earth's best scientists had warned her about the physical disadvantages she would face, but they had also reminded her of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt and overcome. As she took her first step onto the stairs, Kate felt the gravity increase slightly. Her muscles protested, but she pushed forward. She might not be the strongest or the fastest, but she would prove that humans belonged here, even if it meant breaking herself in the process. The challenge had begun, and Kate Miller had no intention of becoming the first human to fail at the Galactic Military Academy. Kate survived her first week at the academy, but only barely. Every morning, she woke up with muscles screaming in protest, her body still adjusting to the higher gravity and thicker atmosphere. The medical bay had become familiar territory, not because she was weak, but because she refused to quit pushing her limits. The combat training arena was a massive dome with adjustable gravity and atmospheric controls. Today, the instructor, a towering being made of living metal named Master Rex, had paired her with Dex, the same reptilian who had mocked her on arrival day. Combat forms, Level 3, Master Rex announced. Show me the 7th stance. Kate moved into position, her muscles trembling slightly under the increased gravity. Around her, 20 alien cadets performed the stance with natural grace. Dex, standing next to her, executed a perfect form that made the air whistle. Wrong. Master Rex's voice boomed as he stopped in front of Kate. Your balance is off. Your form is weak. In real combat, you would be dead before you completed the first move. The other cadets snickered. Dex's scales rippled with amusement. Perhaps we should start her with children's basic forms, Master Rex. Kate bit back a sharp reply and tried again. This time, she compensated for the gravity, adjusting her stance wider. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. Enough, Master Rex declared. Partner combat practice. Full contact, standard rules. Begin. Dex immediately stepped forward. I volunteered to partner with Cadet Miller. Kate's heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. She knew what was coming. Another humiliation session. Dex had made it his personal mission to prove humans didn't belong here. They squared off in the practice ring. Dex moved with frightening speed for his size, his armored scales gleaming under the harsh lights. The first hit sent Kate flying across the mat. She rolled with the impact, something she'd learned after countless falls, and got back to her feet. Stay down, soft skin, Dex taunted. You're embarrassing yourself. But Kate had been watching. Every time Dex moved, his scales shifted in a pattern. There was a rhythm to it, a tell before each strike. She might not be as strong or as fast, but she could learn. The next exchange went differently. When Dex charged, Kate was ready. She didn't try to match his strength. Instead, she used his momentum against him, stepping aside at the last moment. Dex stumbled, surprised by the empty air where his target should have been. The victory was short-lived. Dex recovered quickly and landed 3 rapid strikes that left Kate gasping on the mat. The session ended with her defeat, like all the others before it. That night, after everyone else had retired, Kate sneaked back to the training dome. She discovered that between midnight and dawn, the facility ran on minimal power, and the security systems were less stringent. She accessed the training computers, playing back recordings of the day's sessions. Hour after hour, she practiced the forms. When she fell, she got back up. When her muscles burned, she pushed harder. She studied how each species moved, analyzing their strengths and weaknesses. The crystalline cadets were powerful but brittle. The gaseous beings were quick but couldn't maintain solid form for long. Even Dex's people had limitations. Their armored scales restricted their flexibility. Dawn found her still practicing, her uniform soaked with sweat. She had managed to perfect 2 of the basic forms, adapting them to work with human physiology rather than against it. It wasn't much, but it was progress. As she headed back to her quarters, she passed Master Rex in the hallway. The instructor's metallic features were unreadable, but Kate could have sworn she saw a flicker of approval in his glowing eyes. Interesting, he said softly as she passed. Perhaps there is more to your species than we thought. Kate allowed herself a small smile. They might mock her now, but she had discovered something important. The key wasn't to become like them, but to find her own way to fight. She would show them what humans could really do, one painful lesson at a time. The live-fire exercise chamber was a nightmare made real. Holographic projectors and physical barriers created an ever-changing battlefield, while combat drones fired stun bolts that felt like being hit with white-hot needles. Kate stood at the entrance with her assigned team. Dex, a crystalline cadet named Prism, and a gaseous entity called Mist. Remember, The instructor's voice echoed through the chamber. This is a team exercise. You either all complete the course, or you all fail. Dex's scales rippled with irritation. Try not to die, human. I won't have my perfect record ruined because of your weakness. The buzzer sounded, and the team plunged into chaos. The chamber transformed into a war zone. Broken buildings, smoke-filled streets, and combat drones lurking in every shadow. The gravity shifted randomly, making each step a gamble. Kate had studied the previous runs. She knew the pattern. Teams that stayed together had the highest success rate. But as they rounded the first corner, Dex took off at full speed, leaving her behind. Prism and Mist followed without hesitation. Wait, Kate called out, but they were already gone. A stun bolt whizzed past her head. Kate dove behind a broken wall, her heart pounding. She was alone, abandoned by her team in the most dangerous training scenario yet. The familiar weight of defeat pressed down on her, heavier than the shifting gravity. But something inside her snapped. If they wanted to leave her behind, fine. She would finish this alone. Kate closed her eyes, remembering her midnight training sessions. She had learned to feel the gravity shifts, to read the subtle vibrations in the floor that preceded each change. The drones had patterns too. They always attacked from the highest available position. She moved, not with the brutal strength of Dex's people or the fluid grace of Mist, but with a style all her own. Each step was calculated, each move efficient. When the gravity increased, she was ready. When it decreased, she used it to her advantage. The first drone fell to a precisely thrown piece of debris. The second, she tricked into firing on a third. Kate worked her way through the course methodically, using the environment itself as a weapon. Somewhere ahead, she heard Dex roar in frustration. The sound of crystal cracking told her Prism had taken a hard hit. Mist's distinctive whistle of pain echoed through the chamber. Kate pressed on. Her muscles burned, her lungs struggled with the thick air, but she refused to stop. She had spent too many nights practicing, too many hours studying, to give up now. The final section of the course was designed to be impossible alone. A series of elevated platforms that required teammates to help each other across. Kate looked up at the challenge, then at her chronometer. Her team was somewhere ahead, probably already failed. She studied the platforms, noting the gravity generators beneath each one. The timing would have to be perfect. Kate backed up, took a deep breath, and ran. As the gravity shifted down, she leaped. At the apex of her jump, she grabbed a loose cable hanging from the ceiling. The gravity shifted up, and she used the momentum to swing forward. Platform to platform, she moved like a pendulum, using the changing gravity to her advantage. She landed on the final platform, just as the completion buzzer sounded. Through the clearing smoke, she saw her team. All three of them had failed to complete the course. They stared at her in disbelief. The instructor's voice filled the chamber. Exercise complete. Team status. Failed. Individual status. There was a pause. Cadet Miller has set a new record for solo completion. Kate stood straight, her uniform torn and scorched, but her head held high. She looked at Dex, whose scales had lost their shine with embarrassment. "Next time," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "we either work as a team, or I work alone. Either way, I'm finishing the course." As she walked out of the chamber, she heard whispers from other cadets who had watched the display. For the first time since arriving at the academy, they weren't mocking whispers. They were whispers of respect. The human cadet had finally shown her true strength, and it had nothing to do with gravity or natural armor. It was something uniquely human, the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Major Stone found Kate in the training dome, well past midnight, practicing a combination of moves that didn't exist in any official combat manual. The old instructor watched silently as she flowed from a reptilian power stance into a crystalline defensive form, then adapted it with uniquely human movements. "Interesting technique. Cadet Miller," he said finally, making her jump. Major Stone's species was ancient. His skin looked like weathered bark, and his eyes held centuries of wisdom. I haven't seen anyone combine forms like that since. Well, never. Kate snapped to attention, embarrassed at being caught. Sir, I apologize for using the facility after hours. At ease, he walked closer, his movements deliberate and smooth despite his apparent age. Your solo run through the combat course has caused quite a stir. The instructors are divided. Half think it was luck, half think it was impossible. And what do you think, sir? Major Stone's face cracked into what might have been a smile. I think we've been blind. Come with me. He led her to a small teaching room she'd never seen before. The walls were covered with historical battle recordings from 100 different worlds. With a gesture, he activated one of the displays. Watch, he commanded, pointing to a scene of ancient combat. These warriors are from the granite peaks of Sector 7, naturally strong, incredibly durable. But look closer. Kate studied the recording. The warriors were winning their battle, but something seemed off. They're tiring. Their movements are becoming slower, less efficient. Exactly. Major Stone nodded approvingly. Now this one. He switched to another recording, showing crystalline beings in combat. What do you see? They're perfect, Kate observed. Every move is exactly like the training manual. But, she squinted, they never adapt. Even when their tactics aren't working, they keep doing the same things. Now you're understanding. Major Stone's eyes glowed with excitement. Every species in the Alliance has their strengths. Natural armor, incredible speed, perfect form. But they all have one critical weakness. They stop improving once they master their natural advantages. He turned to face her directly. Humans are different. You're soft, relatively weak, and have no natural defenses. But you adapt. You learn. You take what works and discard what doesn't. Most importantly, you never stop improving. Kate thought about her midnight training sessions, how she'd been studying and combining different combat styles. That's why I could complete the course alone. I wasn't trying to fight like Dex or move like Mist. I was fighting like a human. Precisely. Major Stone's bark-like skin crackled with enthusiasm. Your species' greatest strength isn't in your muscles or bones. It's in your ability to adapt and overcome. While other species rely on their natural advantages, humans create new advantages. He walked around the room, activating more displays. Your night training sessions haven't gone unnoticed, Cadet. You've been unconsciously doing what no other species here thought to do, creating an entirely new combat style suited to your specific needs. Kate felt a surge of hope. So I'm not failing at learning the traditional forms. No, you're evolving beyond them. Major Stone's expression became serious. But this presents a new challenge. The traditional instructors won't accept change easily. They'll resist new methods, especially from a species they consider primitive. What should I do, sir? Keep training. Keep adapting. But most importantly, document everything. Create a formal system out of what you're doing. Prove that it works not just for you, but potentially for others. He paused, considering. I'll help you if you're willing to put in the work. Kate stood straighter, feeling for the first time that she truly belonged at the academy. When do we start, sir? We already have. Major Stone gestured to the recording devices in the room, which had been running the entire time. Your movement analysis just now. That's the beginning of your combat thesis. Now show me that combination you were practicing when I walked in. As Kate moved through her adapted forms, Major Stone watched with growing interest. She wasn't just surviving at the academy anymore. She was about to change it. The human capacity for adaptation was about to shake the foundations of galactic combat training, whether the other instructors were ready or not. The endurance trial chamber hummed with nervous energy as cadets gathered for the monthly evaluation. Today's challenge was deceptively simple: remain standing in increasing gravity while performing complex combat forms. The record stood at 47 minutes, held by a cadet from a high-gravity world. Kate stepped into her designated circle, ignoring the usual whispers. She had spent weeks preparing for this, working with Major Stone to refine her techniques. Her new combat style, which she now called adaptive form, had raised eyebrows among both students and instructors. "Begin," Commander Bright's voice echoed through the chamber. The gravity increased gradually. At 2 times Earth normal, the first cadets began to struggle. At 3 times, several dropped out. Kate kept moving, her modified stances distributing the weight efficiently across her body. Dex watched from his circle, his scaled face showing confusion. The human should have fallen long ago, yet she moved with unexpected grace. Her forms weren't the traditional ones. They were something new, something unpredictable. 4 times Earth gravity. More cadets fell. Kate's muscles burned, but she had trained for this. She shifted smoothly between stances, never staying in one position long enough for the gravity to overwhelm her. "Impossible," someone whispered as the gravity reached 5 times Earth normal. Only Kate, Dex, and 3 others remained standing. Sweat poured down Kate's face, but her movements remained controlled. Dex was the next to fall. His natural armor, usually an advantage, became a liability under the extreme gravity. He crashed to his knees, scales scraping against the floor. The sound echoed through the now quiet chamber. 6 times Earth gravity. The remaining cadets dropped one by one. Kate's vision blurred. Her lungs fought for air, but she kept moving. Major Stone's words echoed in her mind. Adapt, overcome, survive. At 52 minutes, Kate stood alone. She had broken the record, but she wasn't finished. Her new fighting style had one more point to prove. "Cadet Miller," Commander Bright called out, "you may stop. The record is yours." Kate shook her head, managing to speak between controlled breaths. "Request, permission, to continue." The chamber fell silent. Even the instructors stared in disbelief. Commander Bright's metallic features shifted in what might have been respect. Permission granted. She lasted another 10 minutes before finally signaling for the trial to end. As the gravity returned to normal, Kate remained standing. Barely. Her uniform was soaked with sweat. Her muscles trembled uncontrollably, but her eyes shone with triumph. The new record, 62 minutes, not just broken, shattered. Later that day, an unexpected group gathered in Kate's training room. They were the outcasts, cadets who struggled with traditional forms. A crystalline being with a crack in its structure. A gaseous entity that couldn't maintain solid form as long as others. Even a young reptilian whose scales hadn't hardened properly. "We saw what you did," the crystalline cadet said. "We want to learn." Kate looked at them, remembering how it felt to be different, to be mocked. "Traditional forms not working for you." They shook their heads. "Good," Kate smiled. "Then let's try something new." Under Major Stone's watchful eye, Kate began teaching her adaptive form. She showed them how to work with their perceived weaknesses instead of against them. The crystalline cadet learned to use its crack as a flexible point. The gaseous entity developed techniques for rapid phase shifting. The young reptilian discovered that softer scales allowed for faster movement. Word spread. More cadets came to watch, then to learn. Even some instructors began observing quietly from the back of the room. Kate's triumph in the endurance trial couldn't be dismissed as luck or a fluke. The human cadet who couldn't perform traditional forms had created something new, a fighting style that turned disadvantages into strengths. The whispers in the academy's halls had changed. They no longer mocked the human cadet. They wondered what she would do next. And Kate, she kept training, kept adapting, kept improving. Because that's what humans do. The Academy's main assembly hall buzzed with tension as Dex stepped onto the central platform. His scales gleamed under the harsh lights, polished to a mirror finish for this moment. Behind him stood a group of elite cadets, the traditionalists who viewed Kate's rising influence as a threat to centuries of combat doctrine. "Cadet Miller," Dex's voice boomed across the hall. I formally challenge you to the gauntlet." The crowd fell silent. The gauntlet wasn't just any challenge. It was the Academy's most brutal trial. A series of combat scenarios, each more dangerous than the last, designed to push warriors beyond their limits. In its 1,000-year history, only 27 cadets had completed it successfully. Kate stood from her seat, where she'd been studying with her group of students. The past few weeks had changed her. She moved with quiet confidence, her body hardened by countless hours of training. "The gauntlet has never been attempted by a human," Commander Bright warned. "The physical demands alone." "I accept," Kate's voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Dex's scales rippled with satisfaction. "Tomorrow at dawn, 5 challenges, no breaks between trials, standard elimination rules." The news spread through the Academy like wildfire. That night, as Kate prepared in the training dome, Major Stone found her working through her forms. "You know this is a trap," he said quietly. "They've designed the challenges specifically to exploit human weaknesses." Kate nodded, not breaking her routine. "I know. They'll start with high-gravity combat to wear me down, then probably extreme temperature variations, followed by atmospheric pressure tests. The 4th will be endurance-based, and the final," she smiled grimly, "direct combat with Dex. You've thought this through." "They forget something important." Kate continued her movements, each one precise and measured. "Every trial they designed to break me has just shown me more ways to adapt." Dawn arrived with the entire Academy gathered in the Gauntlet Arena. The first challenge began exactly as Kate predicted. Combat drones in crushing gravity. But where they expected her to fight directly, she used her environment, letting the gravity work for her instead of against her. The second trial brought freezing cold followed by searing heat. Kate's adaptive form shifted with the temperatures, her movements changing to conserve or expel heat as needed. She survived. The third challenge tested atmospheric pressure. As the air thinned and thickened dramatically, Kate used breathing techniques she developed during her midnight training sessions. Her movements became minimal but effective. By the 4th trial, even the traditionalists watched in stunned silence. The endurance course should have broken her, but Kate's new fighting style proved its worth. She didn't try to power through like other species. She flowed, adapted, survived. Finally, she faced Dex. The reptilian warrior towered over her, his scales now bearing combat markings. The traditional combat circle activated around them. "You've survived longer than expected," Dex growled. "But this ends now. No tricks, no environmental advantages, just pure combat." Kate settled into her stance, not the traditional form, but her own. "You still don't understand. Everything I've done, every challenge I've faced, has led to this moment. I'm not here to fight like you. I'm here to fight like me." The battle that followed would be talked about for years. Dex's powerful traditional strikes met Kate's fluid, adaptive style. Where he expected weakness, he found strength. When he thought he had her pattern solved, she changed it. The killing blow came not from strength or speed, but from adaptation. Kate turned Dex's own momentum against him, using a combination of moves that flowed from one species' technique to another, ending with a distinctly human flourish. Dex fell. The arena erupted in chaos. Kate stood in the center, bloody but unbowed. She had done more than survive the gauntlet. She had redefined it. Commander Bright's voice cut through the noise. "Gauntlet trial completed. New record set." Kate looked at Dex, then offered her hand to help him up. "Traditional forms have their place," she said quietly, "but the future belongs to those who can adapt." 1 year had passed since the legendary Gauntlet Challenge. The Galactic Military Academy's graduation ceremony was underway, and the massive assembly hall looked very different from that fateful day. Kate stood on the instructor's platform, watching the new class of cadets file in. Her formal uniform now bore the insignia of a combat instructor. The youngest in the Academy's history, but more remarkable than her rank were her students. The graduating class before her was unlike any other. Humans trained alongside crystalline beings, reptilians practiced with gaseous entities. Each cadet moved with a unique style that combined traditional forms with adaptive techniques. Commander Bright stepped forward to address the gathering. Today marks a historic moment for the Academy. For centuries, we taught that each species had its place, its specific combat role. We were wrong. The commander's metallic gaze swept across the room. Cadet, forgive me. Instructor Miller showed us that true strength lies not in adhering to tradition, but in the ability to adapt and evolve. Kate watched as her first class of students demonstrated their skills. The crystalline cadet, who once had a crack in its structure, now used that very feature to channel energy in unprecedented ways. The young reptilian, whose soft scales had been mocked, now moved with a speed that traditional warriors couldn't match. Dex, who had become one of her most dedicated students after the gauntlet, now taught alongside her. His traditional power moves flowed seamlessly into adaptive forms, creating a style uniquely his own. Combat effectiveness across all species has increased by 40%, Commander Bright continued. Injury rates have decreased by 60%, and for the first time in Academy history, we have a zero dropout rate. Kate stepped forward when called, her movements still carrying that distinctive human grace. The future of combat isn't about being the strongest, the fastest, or the most naturally armored, she addressed the gathering. It's about adaptation. Every species has strengths. Every species has weaknesses. But together, we can become something more. She activated the central display, showing recordings of her students' progress. These cadets haven't just learned to fight. They've learned to evolve. Each one has developed their own style, taking what works and discarding what doesn't. They've proven that the strongest warrior isn't the one born with the most advantages, but the one who never stops learning. The Academy's teaching curriculum had been completely revamped. Kate's adaptive combat program was now a core requirement. The old prejudices about weak species were fading, replaced by an understanding that every being had the potential for growth. Major Stone, watching from the back of the hall, smiled his bark-like smile. He remembered finding that determined human practicing alone in the dark. Now her methods were changing the face of galactic warfare. After the ceremony, Kate found a quiet moment in her old training dome, the place where it all began, where countless nights of practice had forged a new way of fighting. A group of new cadets, humans, reptilians, crystalline beings, and others, waited for her first lesson of the new term. Welcome to adaptive combat, she began, seeing the same mix of uncertainty and hope she had once felt. Forget what you think you know about your limitations. Forget what others have told you about your species' role in combat. Here, we don't just learn to fight. We learn to evolve. As she looked at their faces, Kate remembered her own first day of the Academy. How they had mocked her, called her weak, primitive. Now those same voices called her instructor, innovator, pioneer. The Academy had wanted to break the human cadet. Instead, she had broken every record, every tradition, every barrier. But more importantly, she had built something new from the pieces, a future where strength came not from what you were born with, but from what you could become. Let's begin, Kate said, moving into her signature stance. Part human, part reptilian, part crystalline, but wholly unique. Show me who you are, and together we'll discover who you can become. The legacy of the human cadet who changed everything lived on, not in broken records, but in the countless warriors who learned that their greatest strength lay in their ability to adapt, to grow, to evolve.